Okay, so Will Roebuck has been involved in the IT business about 15 years. His main focus these days is the online business community, and as you know, it's an area full of opportunities, but also lots of risks. So, how do we negotiate these tricky areas? Well, compliance, privacy, security, data protection, risk and governance. Will's our man. Some of Will's previous roles, current roles, include, interestingly, prosecutor. Maybe you can tell us about that. A consultant, author, blogger, InfoSec auditor, and he's also a visiting lecturer at the University of Manchester. But I hope you're not going to give us any homework today.
No.
He's recently established a website that helps the online community. This is it. This is it's incredibly industrious. There's always stuff going on there. I just can't keep up with it at times. But it's really a really useful central resource. Although Will's UK-based, interestingly, the web address is eradar.eu. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. It obviously shows your perspective, and it's interesting times for the European
We
community.
couldn't get .com because somebody else had got it.
Oh, I see, that was the reason. He's involved with a lot of some of the things I found on your website. You've been in touch with the information officer based in here in the Manchester area. So you've been advising governments and European community as well. So a lot of different things, and as we said earlier, do feel free to interrupt, have interaction.
When you first invited me here, it was on the basis of looking at how we can use social media to enable the business. So looking at LinkedIn and all the sort of social media networks. I will touch on that. But it also kind of evolved into something a little bit bigger around IT governance, compliance, security, and risk. So this presentation is actually one that I gave to Danish students, MSc students, a couple of weeks ago, around these issues. And some of the things I think that organisations need to think about over the next 10, 15 years, I think. There's a lot happening. So if we make a start then. Why is IT governance important? I think without it, it costs jobs and affects livelihoods. It's as simple as that. It's about organisations safeguarding their competitive and collaborative advantage by protecting the assets and the value in the assets that they have. Corporate reputation. If companies are losing data, you wouldn't want your accountant to lose your financial records, for example. Public procurement requirements. There are, public procurement particularly. Governance is an important part of the contract, and of course, directors are liable, and officers of companies and organisations are liable for if anything goes wrong. Governance is important. You know all this stuff. It's to meet fiscal, legal, and regulatory requirements, and the idea is to provide a minimum minimum standard of best practice. So that organisations can do what they have to do in order to do the business. I talked about having over the last 15 years. We've had 15 years really of the internet, the commercial internet, where organisations have been able to use the internet for their own ends. I know it's been around a lot longer, but from a commercial perspective. And that means that the organisations can, the internet gives speed and convenience of business transactions, cost of inventory control, particularly around supply chain management, a global presence and a marketing opportunity. Small businesses in the top of Cumbria can now get online and do business in a global marketplace. Better customer service, competitive and collaborative advantage, research and innovation, and a social revolution. There's something very special about going on to Skype and being able to talk to your grandchildren when you're in the US and grandchildren back in the UK. So it's all about those things. Those are all the good strengths that we've had from the online world.
And 15 years, so that would make it...
I said about 15 years, yeah.
And so you actually have a time when online community sort of became a business environment?
I tell you what I'm basing it on. I was what I didn't say was I was a member of the Alliance for Electronic Business legal team, Alliance for Electronic Business involved the CBI, GS1, Direct Marketing Association, and Intellect, the supplier trade association. And I was involved in a lot of the early e-commerce legislation, actually advising Parliament and Government on the Regulation of Investment Compels Act, which is the interception stuff that the press have just been recently charged against, the e-commerce regulations. And I think those kind of came really around the year 2000. So those were really to try and respond to the growing business environment of businesses going online. So I'm kind of looking from around 1995, I guess. So it's probably just a little bit more than 15 years. I don't know whether that's reasonable, but
the very first World Wide Web conference took place in 1994. So
yes. But as we were kind of saying earlier, I mean, I think a lot of businesses are still down here when it comes to understanding risk and to understanding how the online world can help them. And obviously with social networks as well, that's another challenge that a lot of organisations are having to deal with, and it's here to stay. So we need to be able to find ways that we can use social networks to enable the business, and rather than just sort of seeing it as an IT risk that that we need to stamp down on and control. There have been weaknesses. The pace of change in the technology versus legacy technologies. I mean, we had the Royal Bank of Scotland computer crashing recently. We had the NHS IT infrastructure project, which was shelved because it was too expensive. It didn't provide enough interoperability. From a legal perspective, we've got massive problems with some of the legal systems. If you've got a server based in Ireland and you're a customer based in the UK and you're buying a product in the United States, whose law applies? Britain has got the British law is based very much on, or English law is very much based upon the common law, but a lot of our continental neighbours, France, Germany, is very much statute. So there's a lot of conflicts there that we have to work through. And I think the general feeling is that self-regulation is probably more flexible and better for online business. Can we get business groups to agree on codes of practice, self-regulation, rather than going down a formal legal route? Because by the time you've got a piece of legislation passed through Parliament, it takes a long time to go through. The technology's changed. We've got the data protection regulation coming up in Europe. It's a regulation rather than a directive, because a directive would have taken too long to go through the European Parliament and the UK Parliament. But by the time we get the regulation, which is 2015, will be 2015, the technology may have moved on, and the new challenges ahead. So there are a few issues there about the conflicts of laws and regulations. Again, something that's come up quite recently, allowing your staff to social network in the workplace versus you're paying them for the time they're doing that. There was an interesting report done by Waverley Council, I think it was down in Surrey, and they actually did a secret report as to how many people within their, how many employees within their office actually went on to their own website, and most were going on Facebook rather than using the council's website. Secret report, and it kind of just demonstrated one of the issues that they have. I'm not saying that all social networking in the workplace is a waste of time, because I think if a company or an organisation has a strategy behind that, then I think it's useful. I was at a conference recently where I think it's the Sheffield Crucible Theatre. I mean, they use Twitter to tweet bargains, last-minute bargains for seats, to their audience. That's a good use of Twitter. There's a hotel chain, I can't remember which one it was, but they have some sophisticated software that picks up the tweets of their customers. And if a customer tweets that the shower's broken in their bedroom, it's fixed within an hour. So there are some very clever ways of doing social networking. Of course, the concerns are, about passing company secrets over in discussion groups and time management. Is it a fair use of time?
I think there's a potential, now being a small business, You're losing that interaction that you used to get in the office and just meeting other people in your business. All of a sudden, there are people kind of making the comments and the things like that, and saying, oh, you know, the have you seens and the all those things that actually sort of really fed me with interesting stuff and stuff to get on with. I now get through a monitor. I mean, I haven't quite got the balance because some of it's so interesting you spend all day just reading it, but just to suddenly think, that's something I ought to be aware of.
But it's the virtual water cooler conversation now delivered through social media.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it's something that we've found again, the new generation of graduates coming through especially, social networking is everything to them.
Yes.
And if you stop them using it, you've lost them.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you subscribe to the online system Register.
Yes, yes.
And one of the elements that was in there was a rather dark example of how Twitter is used, but it just shows how integrated it's becoming. Probably in the Middle East, Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Apparently Israel, and this is the headline in Register, Israel declares war on Hamas via Twitter. I thought, and you know, it's a genuine tweet, but it just shows you how integrated it's becoming.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Hitler has given me 117 characters.
It's I mean, you know, these kids have been brought up with social networking, and you know, you can't just block it from them. You know, it's part of what they do. Interestingly enough, I was talking to a friend of mine. She's vice president of Discovery, and she's just had some applications through from some students, and I see the idea in their head. You know, well, have you looked at their profiles on Facebook? I thought about that, but actually, you know, employers are actually doing that now, rightly or wrongly. And you know, there's a few issues there that you know that I think need to be worked through. But you know, there's so much information available now on people's personal lives, and it's a question of how, you know, are they able to manage that properly, you know, without giving too much away. Really, you know, there is still that professional edge that we have to keep when we're working. You know, when we're in the office. So, so workplace social networking versus time management, that's an issue. I think also as well it's the domino effect from increased globalisation. If you take the Enron example, Enron was a global organisation that collapsed in 2000, based in the US, but they had 20,000 employees around the world. And basically Enron collapsed because the corporate governance wasn't in place. From Enron you got a load of legislation, the US Sarbanes-Oxley Act, for example. But the fact was that, you know, the directors had their fingers in the till. The company went down and 20,000 people lost their jobs. So, you know, the effect on their livelihoods, you know, is something that, you know, it was underestimated really. Take up of networking information security. You know, are companies using information and network security? Do they understand it? There was a report, I think I forwarded it to you, Danny, a couple of weeks ago about, you know, is it really necessary to have all this fancy software when actually it's just about basic understanding of what the issues are, and just to encourage companies to take very basic steps to protect the value of their assets.
Well, the latest paradigm, if that's the right word, of people, I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but it's certainly one probably not a good one to throw in at this point, is for the second time I've heard a major organisation saying antivirus is a waste of time, switch it off, don't waste your money on it. I'm just reporting what I've heard.
So I mean, is that, you know, the question is it something that's true? You know, because we've got smarter in looking at how this stuff works. You know, every day you kind of hear nasty stories about you know, cyber attacks, and you kind of wonder sometimes whether the terrorists and the criminals have actually got the upper hand in terms of the PR stuff, because, you know, they seem to dominate the you know, the news rather than, you know, the good stuff that we've done to try and protect companies. I mean, I think a good example of how well we've done was the Olympic Games. You know, in London, you know, there didn't seem to be any attacks. Everything seemed to go all right. I mean, I'm sure they spent an awful lot of money protecting protecting the systems, and it went well.
It was like year 2000, you know.
Yep.
what was the problem?
What was the
Everybody says, but they don't see all the masses of hours that they think are single.
It's the dock, isn't it? It's gliding over the water. You can't see the
And you know, and I guess the last point here is beware of imitations. You know, you don't know who you're speaking to on Facebook. And you know, we hear stories about bullying and you know, and nasty things happening. You know, for example, through Facebook. You know, this is just where the technology is now, and you know, it's not just a Facebook issue. It's bigger than that. And I think, you know, we've got to look at some of the social effects that the technology is having. Again, you know, we talked about the police commissioner's elections today. You know, it was done mostly online, and not everybody's online. 10% of the population can't read or write. You know, so you know,
there's a prosecution today. Someone's amazing. Only 14 years. Some guy, I think he's in the late 30s, pretending to be a 15-year-old girl to meet a younger girl and attacked her, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And you know, obviously, and that relationship built up over time. So that was going on for a long time.
Well, I hate to say it, and I mean, in my experience, you know, once a paedophile, always a paedophile. You can't change them, but what you can do is manage their behaviour. But we've always had paedophiles, and I'm sorry to say we always will do. We'll always have murders. We'll always will do. People will always be burgling houses. We've just got to try and find better ways of managing it. And unfortunately, you know, I mean, you know, if you love or hate Facebook, I mean, they have got a lot of criticism for a lot of this stuff, which actually, a lot of it's unwarranted, because it's a sign of the times. It's a responsibility of everybody. You know, it's not just the technology and an individual company there to provide a solution. So, again,
in addition to the, you know, controlling the actual perpetrators, is the education of everyone in terms of, and particularly the younger generation coming through, about e-safety and about you know, browsing and social networking security. You know, and I think a lot of young people now are starting to get some of the basics. Yes, there are a number of organisations who promote the good practice in this area. You know, like Get Safe Online, GEOPS, and other organisations who try to promote the right thing. I'm involved in White Hat, which is a big supporter of Childline, and they're constantly trying to get messages out to children about, you know, safe online habits. You know, don't give away personal phone numbers and personal address. Never meet anybody you. I see this here. I'm reminded of the on the internet, Nobody Knows Your Dog series. You know, which makes a very valid point that you can be anything online. But it does it with humour. And I think that's a good way of getting the message across to young people as well, to layer it with humour, but underlying the serious point.
And there is a debate at the moment at a policy level about, you know, should people be allowed to be anonymous on the internet, or should they be, you know, should they be required to provide their information? Now, I think a minister it was a civil servant that kind of mentioned this a few weeks ago, and there was a lot of controversy over it because he said everyone should be allowed to be anonymous. But of course, that
wasn't specifically lie about that.
Well, you know, I mean, if people are anonymous, then how do you detect those people that, you know, perpetrate crime, for example? You know, a lot of the contracts that you have, for example, with your ISPs, you know, you have to be a real person, and you know, even a lot of the legislation as a company, you know, you have to have certain information requirements. You have to say who you are, what you do. You know, it's part of the e-commerce framework. So there's a lot of discussion going on, and I don't think we'll resolve it overnight. Really, I think it's going to be ongoing for.
That's an echo. That's an echo of what we're doing in the world at large now. We're evolving different identities for different social or business interaction purposes. So we are a different person when we're in the office compared to when we're in the supermarket shopping, or compared to when we're in the pub, or when we're in the club at night at 2:30 in the morning, you know, or whatever. And what we do and how we behave is different. And therefore the circle of people that we meet in those circumstances is different. and indeed how we'd like them to perceive us and how we portray ourselves is different. And as we move into that in an online sense, we are now evolving to managing different identity profiles and having I suppose segregation or air gaps between those.
I think
is
we are
actually increasingly important.
I'm not convinced that children are that.
No, and I think that's part of the education we have to get across, is to maintaining the separation between those.
Because I think the education needs to start at nursery level. Of course, we've got the problem is that the people who have to do the education don't understand, or are bound by so many rules. I mean, so the case study I would give, I mean, I've just mentioned divorce, but so it's given me a whole load of new perspective on all kinds of different situations, different services. I was so pleased when a judge basically said, right, you need to have some, they basically forced us to go into mediation. And found this supposedly child-centric mediation. You know, the whole reason for going for the mediation was to sort out the childcare arrangements. And they actually call themselves Children First, and so I thought, this is wonderful. So first, the parents have got to go and give consent. Okay, so that was fine. We agreed straight away. Look, you can contact. We want the child to be involved. So right. So I pointed out, here's my son. He's Facebook and text and all of that kind of stuff. And they refused to use any of these things. I said, he's a 16-year-old boy. So you can imagine what his communication skills are like. Deliberately negative. And basically, he'll pay attention to anyone who sends him a text. He'll have a look at a text. Emails he's not really interested in. I mean, because he has a good relationship with his aunt, and she knows that if she wants to get his attention, it's a text. So I said to these people, he said he won't come for a formal appointment until you got to break the ice, send a text, all that kind of stuff. Oh no. If I got his agreement verbally and then related it back to them, they would then send him a letter inviting him for an appointment. This was a child-centric mediation service, one of very, very few who totally refused. And she took it up the levels. And the supervisor, the senior person phoned me and said it would be totally inappropriate for one of their counsellors, who are supposedly CRB checked, blah 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 blah, who can have a one-to-one meeting with this child in a room, totally inappropriate to send them a text. And then I can't remember which council it was, where there was a little bit of enlightenment, and the social services were allowed to use Facebook and the like to contact some of their, some of their vulnerable charges. Then when the CEO, the complaints were made, and so the CEO of the council then opened up Facebook to everybody, because it was discriminatory just to allow the social services department to have it. There's this stupid rule setting where there is absolutely no view of the objectives, and then saying, okay, well, the objectives are to keep children safe, whatever it might happen to be. What tools can we actually use?
Work out something that enables that. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So you really know who you're talking to. Again, 15 years of opportunity. There's now 2.5 billion people online as of June 2012. That's 34.3% of the world population. And that's certainly growing in Africa, where mobile technologies is being used there to get people online, because they don't need any broadband. It's all sort of satellite driven. E-commerce sales in the UK represent 16.9% of total sales. Website sales represented 4.2%. These are just a few figures that I put off from national statistics. 78.7% of businesses had a website. 51.9% of businesses had mobile broadband. 86.5% of businesses use the internet to interact with public authorities. That's an interesting one, because of course now the Inland Revenue, for example, if you are VAT registered, you have to do everything online. So that's sort of government trying to encourage businesses to use the online world to report, to do statutory reporting.
I remember here in the UK the idea from the government and moving the government online. Jill, did you see work with the Bolton Metro?
No, NHS Bolton.
NHS Bolton, okay. A lot of the councils now use as their first port of call. In fact, if you ring them, you'll say, "Have you tried our website first?" So, and I've seen that transition personally. It's been a huge transformation.
And I think, as generations, it's a generation thing, I'm sure, as well, that, as this stuff embeds itself in the next generation, then, more and more people will be using it. But it doesn't still negate the fact, there's poor families in society that can't get onto the internet. 10% of, 10% of people can't read or write. So there's some real sort of practical skill gaps there and accessibility issues.
But actually, a serious point. That's what symbols and pictures are for.
Yes.
And website design needs to take that into account as well. So you can actually transcend illiteracy with the use of technology as well.
Yeah.
A lot of phone apps are designed with that in mind. There's some symbology.
I think there is a new mobile phone out I've seen recently which just has big buttons and that's it.
Yeah.
And again, 15 years of threats, both across society, business and government. Of course, we have financial fraud and identity theft. Children and citizens, I mentioned sort of harassment and bullying online, theft of identity, theft of data, theft of intellectual property. And of course, international terrorism. Terrorists are now using the internet to pass messages, to launch attacks against companies and other organisations. So that's why, in 2011 we had the UK cybercrime strategy, which sets out the government's response to all of this and to put the UK's online infrastructure right at the top of the political agenda. Because if the infrastructure falls down, then we can't do business, we can't do anything. Can you imagine somebody hitting HM revenue and customs? I'm knocking the system on us. It doesn't work perfectly anyway, I know. But the cost to the UK economy is estimated to be around £27 billion per year, and welfare tax fraud costs between £200 and £300 per citizen per year. So I guess the point is there that we need to make the systems work properly so that the right services are delivered to the right people. When I'm kind of talking about IT, I mentioned earlier, it's really about doing business online. Whether you're transacting or whether you've got an electronic database full of information, an organisation is conducting business. And this is kind of the basic stuff, really. Why do we have? Why do we need IT? It's all down to supply and demand. We have goods, services, the digital downloads, financial instruments. Every organisation exists for a reason. It doesn't matter whether it's in the private sector, public sector, whether it's the National Health Service. You are delivering services, you're delivering products, and an organisation has to be efficient in order to do that. And technology is the enabler, together with business processes and people. Technology is just part and parcel of the jigsaw. End of the day, it's about the business bottom line. If you're not meeting the business bottom line, then you go into liquidation, and that's it. Unless, of course, you've got a friendly bank manager who's giving you some support whilst you get your business going. Again, it's the same with I guess with the National Health Service. It's not a bottomless pit, but it's trying to make that balance right between delivering the services and making sure that they're financed properly. There's a lot of pressure being put on the small and medium-sized businesses at the moment to encourage competition, enterprise and innovation to grow the economy out of the recession. And that's supported, I mentioned earlier, by people, processes, technology and information. And in order to have that, and to have the trust and to have the confidence, you need good laws, regulations, standards and best practices in order to enable that to happen. Because if you don't have if I buy something from you and I know that if something goes wrong I can't enforce it, I can't get my money back, then I'm not going to buy from you again. And there are consumer laws to protect me. So that's kind of a bit of the framework around which IT sort of sits, really. So it's about balancing supply and demand against risk. It's about, on the one hand you've got the entrepreneurs wanting to push the business and to generate growth, but then there is the risk element. Well, you can't do this, and you've got to be careful of that. to deploy resources carefully, about smarter business management, identifying, developing, using the right people skills, re-engineering business processes, investing in enabling technology, and having a responsive legal environment, having laws that work and are certain, and don't provide market uncertainty, which means that we're very nervous about doing business with anybody. So I did a survey with the British Standards Institute a couple of years ago, and asked the basic question: why does an organisation comply with laws and regulations? And these are the answers that the respondents gave. The biggest one was about customer trust and confidence. It's the customer that is central to all of this. It's about protecting the business, providing the evidential trail so that if there is litigation, the business can defend itself up to legal standards in a court of law. And I'll talk about that in more detail in a little while. It's about sector requirements. The financial services sector, has sector requirements again. I kind of backtrack a little bit because it's coming from lots of criticism over the last couple of years that the Financial Services Authority hasn't been strong enough to deal with that. But like in the health sector, there are specific requirements around patient records, for example, that you have to follow. If you are complying properly, can you get reduced insurance premiums? This was a big topic for many years, and all of a sudden I've started to see business insurance sort of coming into play about if you've got due diligence in your IT infrastructure, you can get a reduction on insurance. I think it's still a very new market. I don't know whether you've got any comments to make or not.
Yeah, I'm actually advising a client at the moment
where
you're having the attestation that they do stuff right.
Yes.
Gets a lower premium.
Yeah.
It's just there.
No, that's
it's just got material online.
And how long has that been going? Because
it's a couple of years now.
Has it? Yeah. So having reduced insurance premiums, if a company's done its due diligence properly and complies with relevant standards. About corporate reputation, you don't want to be losing your customers' data because no sooner you do that than your competition picks up on it and you lose the business. Who wants to have a financial accountant that loses financial records? Dumps them in the dustbin outside. Director and vicarious liability. Directors are responsible. Officers of a company, of an organisation, are responsible for the actions of the organisation, and the company, the organisation, is also responsible for the actions of its employees. Vicarious liability. Then there's the regulatory stick. The Information Commission is going to fine me £500,000 if I don't protect my personal data. So therefore, I'm going to comply. That actually, this is the list top down. So the regulatory stick actually comes quite a way down, interestingly. And of course, it's about secure transactions. Particularly for small businesses that are procuring with larger organisations. The large organisations, if they've spent a lot of money on the security of their systems, they don't want a small business doing business with them to be the weak link in that chain in security. So it's about the supply chain and doing business in a secure way online.
I'm really interested in where corporate reputation pops so far down. I expected that to be higher, particularly in the private sector, because for all of us here in the InfoSec world, 2021 is a big deal. And I think recently, this year, both Google and Microsoft got their cloud offering. 27,001 certified, and we're all publicising it very, very well, which is appropriate because it was one of the areas that cloud computing was causing a lot of people major concerns. The competitive edge is something which I expected to be there as well. And
yes.
So it's really interesting. How long ago was this done?
This was done, I think, 2005. And let me kind of just also say as well that it wasn't a very scientific piece of research. What BSI did was to send it to a load of their email contacts. I think they sent it to about 700 people, and obviously 700 didn't respond, and it was a mixture of different people in different organisations. So But we were just trying to sort of identify the yardstick of what actually people were concerned about. And let me just say as well that throughout the whole of this presentation, competitive and collaborative advantage are two things that I kind of underline all of this stuff. Competitive advantage, obviously, from a commercial perspective, but also it's about collaborating in, particularly within the public sector. It's about providing, being collaborative in terms of relationships with suppliers and with your stakeholder base. So again, some of the challenges and issues, the corporate challenges around vicarious and director liability, the fact that that directors are liable for the actions of the company. There is a duty of care towards the employee, and therefore it's important to prevent improper and illegal activity over systems and networks. When, for example, you allow your employees to go online and use Facebook or to browse the internet. There's plenty of cases where there's kind of been macho offices where there's been ladies working, and men have downloaded porn, and it's been obviously it's inappropriate.
The tweets from Lord McAlpine were made on somebody's work equipment during work time.
Yeah, it's happening now. Another example, I don't know whether I can't remember whether I mentioned it later, but for example, child pornography is obviously illegal, and particularly gross images of children being abused. Well, if something like that appears on your work system, if you as an innocent employee sort of copy it to your manager, you could actually be liable for criminal prosecution. So you have to have systems in place to make sure that if those kinds of images do come through, you can protect your employees as well from being prosecuted. The way to deal with it is to appoint an IT person who is responsible for dealing with this stuff. And if it comes in, then you tell the employees to go and report it to that person, but don't touch it on your system, because that's when the police need to come in, and it's about preservation of evidence and stuff like that. And on a personal level, directors failing to undertake duties implied by law as additional duties in their contract. How do you protect? How do you protect at a director level? How do you protect your employees from increasing litigation that seems to be sort of taking place now, particularly from people say it's from the US, but there's lots of instances now where employees are being taking the companies to court and getting damages for companies failing to organisations failing to protect them whilst at work, because they're neglecting that duty of care. From a contractual perspective, you have to prove the existence of agreement in a disagreement with a customer, and IT has a role to play in providing the evidential trail in order to do that. How do you defend an action for unfair dismissal before an employment tribunal if you can't guarantee the evidential trail? I'm not speaking out of turn, but I'm not going to say which bank it is, but I know there is a high street bank at the moment that can't enforce 20% of its contracts because it's lost them in the digital ether. And the implication is that actually they're not alone. And it's not just the banks, it's lots of other organisations that can't do it either. And then there is the legal point that you need to be able to, through information management, IT governance, prove an intellectual property right or an invention. These are just some of the commercial issues that you need to think about.
So you say they've actually lost the contract?
There's no evidential trail.
They actually don't have a contract anymore.
The contract's there, it's in the digital ether, but how do they know who signed it, when it was signed, and whether that, whether it's authentic? Because the security around it isn't to the standard that the court would want.
10 similar Word documents in a directory.
Yeah, I'll talk about evidence in a moment, but yes. But it kind of makes you wonder. Can organisations do that? You hear a lot of organisations settling out of court. That's probably one of the reasons why they want to do that. So again, with IT and information governance, the regulatory issues, registering, reporting, retaining and disposal of records, there's a whole load of regulatory requirements. Data protection, the data protection principles we need to make sure that we comply with. And a lot of the commercial legislation is now very much around consumer protection as well, because, well, cynically I would say, that the legislators, the MPs, the MEPs want to do that because consumers equal votes. But actually, consumers are at a bargaining disadvantage when they do business with you, which is why you have terms and conditions. So within the law, there is consumer protection legislation that allows for mandatory consumer protection. Business, it's kind of, well, we're on the sort of same level as you with another business, so we can discuss it and we can argue the toss there. But certainly from a consumer protection, from a consumer perspective, it's a different matter. And and how do we manage the security of our systems and networks around information? To a good standard, particularly when we've got legacy systems still around. There's this whole discussion now about big data and how that would work, and the fact that technology is changing. We've got cloud computing. How do you secure your data in cloud computing when you don't know where it is? You're still responsible for it. It's all those issues that I think we're still working through the challenges on this, and I don't think there is an easy answer as yet. And certainly the law doesn't cover everything, and it's very uncertain in some areas. I won't sort of go through this too much because you can perhaps go through it later. But this is really about digital evidence and legal admissibility. The fact that you have to prove to a certain standard that the evidence it can be admissible in court, and that means having the security and authenticity around your IT systems to enable you to do that. In civil cases, the burden of proof is a little bit lower, with the plaintiff requiring you to prove on a balance of probabilities, whereas criminal cases it's beyond reasonable doubt. The level in criminal cases, the standard of proof is a lot higher. Simply because people can lose their liberty if they have to do. And evidence is admissible. Digital evidence is admissible in court under the Electronic Communications Act. There are two previous acts, the Civil Evidence Act, but it's just really giving you an overview of where some of the legal basis is. If you have, there is the British Standards Code for legal admissibility and an evidential weight of information stored electronically. It's really just sort of saying, that you have to put security, you have to put authentication around your data and information in order to make sure that you protect the company in case of litigation. If someone came in tomorrow and said, we want a copy of all your emails because we're going into court tomorrow, could you retain them? Could you find them? Could you produce them? And there are plenty of cases where things have been thrown out because you can't do it. They haven't been able to do it because the systems aren't robust enough. So I would say actually this is probably, for an IT security, from an IT security perspective, this is actually probably the most important. It's about protecting the value of the information in the organisation and making sure that it is admissible as evidence. Talked about, I know it was a point that one of Danny's students raised, there's the misuse of devices now, the abuse and the misuse of computers in the workplace, sending out defamatory remarks, the breach of confidentiality where, you go onto Facebook or you go onto LinkedIn and you're discussing a group, discussing something in a particular group and you have to give your company secrets away. That's a risk. Using and abusing copyright without permission. The Digital Economy Act now makes file sharing illegal, peer-to-peer file sharing illegal. So when I, as a youngster, was able to download I didn't download it, I was able to copy my Queen record and put it on tape and give it to my mate. Because we're online now, it was illegal anyway, but we did it. But now, because it's online...
Off the record.
Oh, yeah, that's on the record. Off the record. you know, the fact that, you know, kids, well, anybody can download music easily. The rights holders are missing out on copyright. You know, if you as an artist have spent years developing a song or, you know, an album, and to lose the revenue from that, I mean, you know, it's an issue. So how do we do that? So copyright is now, you know, breach of copyright is now illegal. You know, negligence, again, this is an IT thing, negligence in sending viruses to other businesses. Do your employees know not to open an email with they don't know, you know, they suspect, or they don't even suspect, they just don't know where it's come from. They open it and there's a virus inside it. And sexual or, you know, racial harassment. I mean, we've had Lord McAlpine this week, you know, on Twitter. I mean, absolutely disgusting the way that that's been handled, or that's been done by. On the Radar website, we have one of, I don't know, do you know Philip Virgo from Uri? Yeah. Well, Philip writes quite profusely on a lot of the IT policy issues. He's probably one of the UK's leading IT political analysts. And he runs a group called, well, it's called the Digital Policy Alliance now, but their members are MEPs and MPs. And Philip writes on our website, and he referred to them as twats today, which was quite, not twits, twats. So, you know, I think there's a real, people really need to think about what they're doing now. Sally Burker needs to think about what she's doing and what she's saying on Twitter, because it sounds as if McAlpine's lawyers are going to go after her. You know, because, absolutely. So, you know, this is part of us getting smarter, I think, in how we're using the technology. You know, it's a learning curve, I know, but you know, I get a little bit opinionated on this. I mean, we don't live, you know, we don't have free speech and we don't have freedom of the press. We don't have it because there's still the rule of law. You know, you can't go around slagging somebody off all the time. You know what I mean? You know, there are boundaries that we have to redefine, I think, now. And I think the problem with technology and how, particularly social networks, is it's kind of blurred those boundaries a little bit.
It's also the
You
speed.
can, as long as it's true.
Yes, yes.
It's also the speed and permanence. If you look at, you know, the effort you have to go to publish something in a printed form, you've got to actually agree the text, you've got to proofread the text, you've got to agree the design, colour scheme, and so forth. You've got to send it off to be, you know, set up and get the proofs back from the printers before you then press the button and say publish.
Yeah.
Whereas you can do it on one of these things, so you can publish on that. And I think people haven't gotten into their head the fact that they're publishing to the world at large.
Yeah.
And Danny will know my famous comment, you can't undisclose a disclosure.
That's where it comes from.
You know, once it's out, it's out.
I thought Danny was being clever as well.
I always quote Jerry.
Being able to recall something once it's gone is pretty impossible
Yeah.
in the current digital age.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So think before you press.
Yes.
You know,
I mean, I have to say, I mean, I've, you know, when I've kind of published web pages on the Radar website, and you know, we needed to change a word or two, and it's Google get it. And once Google have got it, that's it. You know, it's there for the world to see. So
now you know where to send the royalties for that quote. You
know? No, absolutely, yes, absolutely. You know, I mean, some of the, you know, abuse and misuse could be, you know, downloading porn is not a criminal offence, but then it could be, you know, and I guess, you know, organisations need to determine their own standards in terms of what they will allow employees to do or not. You know, as I say, there's a lot of good information on the website regarding you know, how do you deal with things like that. So it's practical information. One of the things I've always been interested in is how do you translate all this high-level stuff for what it means for a business and what it means for people that are having to use this technology, you know, on a day-to-day basis. Again, monitoring communications in the workplace. Everyone has a right to privacy, even at work. But we have the Regulation of Investor Duty Powers. That's one of the acts that I worked on back in 2000. One of Blunkett's piece of legislation that was aimed at updating the interception regime on, you know, for interception communications. and it is the Ripper Act that all the press have been taken to court on for unlawful monitoring, unlawful access to emails and things. But under a regulation, the lawful business practice regulations, you're allowed to monitor communications in the workplace so long as there is a lawful business purpose for doing so. And that lawful business purpose might be for quality purposes, for training purposes, for security purposes. But what you have to do is you have to tell people that you have to inform them that you are monitoring. You don't have to get the consent, but you have to inform them. So when you ring up your call centre and talk to someone at the call centre, there's a little note at the beginning that a little voice to say we may monitor for security and quality purposes. Well, that is a piece of legislation that allows that to happen. And how do you monitor? This is a big issue. Now that more people are working away from the office, how do you monitor remote workers? How do you make sure that if they're out of the office, that if you need to monitor, how do you do it? Blanket monitoring of employees is not acceptable. So if you suspect that something's going on that's illegal, you can't monitor everybody. You've got to have real reason. You can't monitor anyone. You have to investigate it. And it must be justified, and you have to look at other alternatives to monitoring before you actually do the monitoring. And again, the Information Commissioner on the website, there's some. I think it's the Employment Practices Code. There's loads of information on that.
On the US side, I was looking at doing a piece of research into CALEA, which is the Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act in the US. Came from the FBI around the time the telephone exchanges went from mechanical to digital, and I thought, we're losing visibility of being able to tap lines here. We're going to have to do this digitally now, so that to keep pace with the way technology is moving. They've got the CALEA Act. Now, of course, people are using voice over IP, so they can't monitor those calls. So now the attempt is now being made to extend CALEA to control the internet.
Yes, and there's a
lot of resistance to that, obviously, from suppliers as well.
There is the Communications Bill. I think it's the Communications Bill that's going through the current UK Parliament.
Yeah.
That is actually trying to cover things like that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
The Patriot Act, presumably that allows the FBI and indeed any of the federal agencies to monitor pretty much anything they want, doesn't it?
No, it's limited.
It's limitations.
It's a little bit like in the UK we had the
emergency powers.
Yeah, and it was very much monitoring email communications, but it was I couldn't get this right. The actual what's the term? I'm completely gone over it. But the communications data rather than the content of the email. So it's actually when it was sent, where it was sent from, and who it was sent to, but it wasn't the actual content of the email. The traffic analysis. And that only originally extended to email, but then they introduced regulations in 2009 that looked at web traffic as well, because they delayed it a couple of years because it was a bit complicated and they needed a bit longer to see how that would work. But again, they're looking at the Communications Bill now, which again won't look at content, because to access content, you can do it under civil evidence and criminal evidence legislation to get the content. But it's to deal, the new bill is to cover everything, a multitude of sins really, and to anticipate new technology coming out that actually might need to be covered by the acts, and the same thing. So rather than introducing new legislation, if we do a broad legislation now, then we won't need it in the future.
And the concern is the term they use is going dark. The parts of what's going on are becoming invisible to them.
Yes.
And there's concern, obviously, in trying to track either terrorism or crime, that the criminals are able to hide.
As we develop our own, secure methods of keeping business under wraps, then the same technology is now using C2C, criminal to criminal networks.
And I think the challenge here is how far this can go without impacting on the rights of privacy or the right of anonymity, or the right of even commercial businesses keeping their information secret.
Yes.
Competitive information secret. So how far can regulators, government, law enforcers go in terms of overseeing or eavesdropping without controls, or without there being some overarching framework that says when they can and can't switch the monitoring on or off.
I'm nearly at the end. Data protection, I mentioned before, is obviously a big thing because it deals with people, and it's about managing personal data and sensitive personal data. And two of the key big issues really are on Principle 7. Making sure that organisations have adequate security measures in place. And Principle 8, international transfers, this is about sending data into the big wide world and whether other regimes, other countries have data protection to the same standard as Europe, which is where our data protection legislation comes from. The US, for example, don't have a standard data protection act. Because it's a federal government. So what they've done is they've agreed with the European Commission on what's called safe harbour, and companies sign up to safe harbour to say that they will agree to manage personal information to an EU standard. If there's no safe harbour agreement, then it's about then the companies have to get contractual agreements between them. And bearing in mind that a lot of UK companies are now doing business with the US. A lot of UK companies are owned by businesses in the US. So when I kind of talk about UK legislation, which I kind of focused on today, it's actually about global legislation because a lot of the US legislation it affects how we do business here. Sarbanes-Oxley on corporate governance. If companies do not comply with corporate governance in line with Sarbanes-Oxley and doing business with the states, then there are issues. So it's not just about UK law, it's about global legislation. I mentioned cloud computing because this is a challenge. Where is personal data held? Companies, organisations are responsible for all personal data they hold, but if they put it onto a server or servers somewhere, anywhere in the world, where are they? Because they have to comply with EU legislation. And of course, with cloud computing as well, there's all the sort of, is it secure? What happens if I need that information? Can I get it easily? Is it held in a country where the regime might collapse? Loads of different things. And of course, sensitive personal data, particularly from a health service perspective or HR records, things like sexual information about sex lives, sexual orientation, religion, membership of trade associations. That's sensitive personal data. So I think the general guidance is that has to be encrypted because it is what it is.
It's always amazed me that financial information is not seen as sensitive. Everyone personally around the table would probably say, I don't want people to know how much I earn. And I'm meeting it in a current role I'm working on where it's dealing with pension, processing pension administration. And it's related to what people earn. And although it's not sensitive in the DPA terms, it certainly is sensitive.
Yes, yeah. And you can go into your normal high street bank and the couple in front of you are discussing their mortgage, and by the time they've finished, you've got all their personal details. If you're a criminal, you can just write them down and.
But the interesting thing, the challenge with digital is that what was previously quite anonymous becomes identifiable with just the addition of one new factor. You put two things together.
Combination.
Or not even I suppose sometimes it's not even a combination. It's association, and if the data set is something about somebody particularly something. If you've got something which is particular to you. Then it's easily to where you do a particular job in a particular part of the country where that isn't very common, I think I was. I don't know whether it says something like the northeast, but I was the only boy in our class with green eyes. I don't know what that means, but okay, but it does show that it's something. There are unusual. There's some things which suddenly pop up and put two and two
I
together.
was the only female engineer as a squadron leader in the Air Force. So any data that came out, everybody knew it was me.
Yeah.
And immediately identifiable.
That's probably identified on a national scale then, yeah, and it's, yeah.
I've spoken to the Information Commissioner on this in times past, and postcode, believe it or not, can be personally identifiable information. There's certain parts of the UK, there's so few population, that postcode equals one person.
But how do you make that valid judgment? Because sometimes it would equal personal information, and sometimes it wouldn't.
Yeah.
So it's the fine line, really. You might be getting it right and getting it wrong, kind of thing.
I keep saying this is probably the sort of the boring academic side of me, but I think there is a study. I mean, I don't know whether it's an impossible goal, but I would love to study the possibility of devaluing information, because it's only because you can put these things together and actually get something out of it that all of that stuff, that we're worried about all of that stuff. If there's some way of removing that value.
But you're running against, it's a Canute job, because you're running against the tide. There are too many organisations whose sole objective is to get out there, grab the information from whatever sources they can freely grab it, and make that association, join that stuff up and sell it on to people.
Most of them are selling payment protection insurance for recovery, aren't they?
Whether or not it's correct.
Whether or not it's right,
Taking two bits of information
sell
and
it.
put it together as working with help.
Coming to the end, so again, with information about retention of information, deleting it and retrieving it if it's called as evidence in a court. Organisations must have evidence to rely upon it if it's called. Information management policy, therefore, must cover retention, access and exchange. I mean, all this stuff. Wire policy, about business costs, legal and regulatory reasons for having a policy in place. Not many organisations actually do have a data retention policy in place. It's not just about data retention policy, it's a whole data management policy, data assurance policy, I guess, to cover the multitude of sins. But I guess when it comes down to it, it's actually how do you manage the value of that information that and Danny's kind of talked about. Can we devalue? A lot of the information about a lot of data about information and where it goes and losing it is actually commercially sensitive, so companies don't really want to talk about it for obvious reasons, because it's a competitive market out there, and it's something that they have to they try and play down. And just very quickly about eRadar, it's a social networking site, but it is with a difference, because it's actually the knowledge vault and the knowledge platform that's kind of been there first, with the social platform built on it. And it's really trying to look at all these different issues around managing information governance, compliance and risk. For example, there is a list of all the UK laws and regulations around IT on there, and there's an e-book as well that you can download. And I think there's about, how many? There's about 130, 140, and we're working on the US ones at the moment. The idea being that we will eventually come out with a book with all global laws in for everybody. And it's not just about laws; it's about where you can get help and best practice as well. So obviously data protection. Where to go to the Information Commissioner's website and what information is available on there. There's free to use forums. We monitor and scrutinise stuff coming out of the European Union and the UK government at the moment, just to keep people up to date with what's going on. Data protection regulation is a good example. There's a new ID directive, I don't know if it's a directive or a regulation, to try and, we had the ID card fiasco in the UK, but identifying somebody, it's important for the business relationship. If you're contracting online, you need to identify your patient. You need to deliver national health services to the right people. And I guess I think Danny made the point actually that if we get all this wrong, actually people can die. If you, because you have the wrong information governance in place, put the wrong information on I'm picking on you heavily, but you know, if you put the wrong information on some medicine and administer it, and if somebody dies, that's a problem. So you know, it's trying to make a whole, you know, trying to make sense of all of this, and to try and just put some basic best practice, good practice around what we're doing online.
So I was going to kind of say there's the case of the parking space in Sainsbury's. Somebody basically, you know, just like it was just about to go in. Somebody took his parking space.
Mm.
The guy who lost the parking space had a mate in the police. Got the guy through the number plate. Got the guy's address and just went round to give him a scare. Lob a brick through his window, but the guy had a weak heart and died from the shock.
Mm. That was commonplace a few years ago. Not wanted to knock the police, but they authorised they get access to the police national computer without authorisation, and you know, just look at what the next door neighbour was doing. If we've got a boundary problem, you know, we've got something on them kind of thing. I mean, that doesn't happen now.
As soon as councils went onto the government secure internet, then everybody was having to look to see what everybody else was doing.
Yeah.
But that's a big factor, actually. An example, in a development project I was working on, where we were developing for banking application, we were developing a new branch interface software for dealing with customers over the branch. And one of the new features was having a credit reference check online, and being able to access that service. And the IT staff testing the facility were able to make the access to Equifax or Experian, one of the two. Now, as you know, once a search is made, it increments, it counts against you. In case you're making multiple loan applications and stuff. Here's somebody who's making 17 loan applications. Must be wrong on the money here. So they stop you, and so every incremental search against you impacts on your credit rating. So when we were doing the testing on this, we had an agreement with Experian, whichever one it was, that they would switch off the monitoring. Now, switch off the incrementation. The development staff thought that the monitoring of the access was switched off. Not so. I was getting a report at the end of the month with all the searches that had been conducted, including everybody in the department, and their neighbours and everybody else and their friends and colleagues they worked with and everything. You know, and because they were mistakenly believing there wasn't the looking over the shoulder, and they thought there was, you know, so let's get away with this. And human nature. It is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, I mean, I guess it's sort of back to you really. You know, I've talked about the last 15, 20 years. We're now in 2012. Is it a bit of a turning point for us? You know, we've got a global recession. The euro's under threat. £1 trillion pounds in UK government borrowing. 60% of EU cross-border e-commerce transactions are failing at the moment because of the disjointed digital single market. I've just finished sitting on the Ministry of Justice's task force looking at the European sales law, which tries to put down some standard contractual terms, business to business, business to consumer, to try and resolve that. The government's decided they're not going to support it. But I mean, 60% of cross-border e-commerce transactions failing, that's a scandal for UK online business. It means that, you know, the companies in Manchester and Scotland, you know, they're missing out on revenue and missing out on growth and missing out on employing people, and it's about livelihoods in the UK. Obviously, public sector cuts and increasing unemployment, I believe it's just slightly gone down, hasn't it, over the last month or so. And you know, the European digital single market, is it working or isn't it? You know, we seem to be going down a bit of a black hole in that one at the moment, and I understand that they're back in recession again. So I guess, you know, my final point is we need visionaries, innovators and entrepreneurs to recognise the opportunities and walk through the door, and the best way to predict the future is to create it. you know, I think we're reaching a bit of a turning point. You mentioned the tipping point earlier, and I think we're kind of getting there, where we have to start using technology in a smarter way. And it isn't just about IT. I think it's about the whole, you know, end-to-end process of people, process. Technology is part about how we manage information, and you know, and how we kind of, you know, make life better for all of us, really. I think that's it.
I mean, I just, I feel that if we had about 3 hours, you still would have been talking at the end.
We do a training session on it if you...
No, that's really absolutely fascinating. And I tell you what, the most useful bit I found is the depth of your insight to the legal side of information security, which I hadn't really appreciated. And that's something which perhaps can get you back again and talk about again. So I think if we can thank our speaker in the traditional manner.
Thank you.